Tamiyendi, Rungasamy est une poète récemment publiée. Son recueil de poèmes, intitulé The Awakening, a pour but d'inciter les passionnés de littérature comme elle à croire en la beauté de la vie. Ces vers, qui sont l'aboutissement d'années d'introspection, trouvent leur muse dans les subtilités de sa vie et dans les personnes qui l'entourent. Dans cet épisode de Mots et Écrits, elle se plongera dans son parcours d'auteur, d'éducatrice et surtout d'individu pleinement épanoui.
So my name is Tamiyendi Rungasamy, but I think nobody calls me that. Most people call me Tami. The only time I was called Tamiyendi was with my parents when I was in trouble. My life partner, my husband, is Jimmy, and I have two sons, Dylan and Jaden, who are both adults. I'm a teacher. I started my career as a teacher, and I've been teaching literature for 20 years. And currently I'm the assistant principal for student life and wellbeing at Northwest International School. I have a very deep connection with the school as one of the founding members of the school. But most importantly, I love to teach literature to young people, to fuel young minds. And it's, the discussions that you have can be quite thought-provoking. And that's one of the things that I really love about my job.
And you are a newly published author. You recently published your collection of poems. Tell us about your journey as an author.
It's a journey that actually has only just begun. As a young child, when I was at school, I always used to love to write short stories, small poems, and it's something that I've always cherished in my heart deep down. It's not a decision that I made to become an author. It's just one of those things that actually happens to you on the path of life. And as a teenager, I also used to write short stories. I've always had this love for creative writing. And so one day I just sat down and I thought, okay, well, let me just write what makes me feel alive. And poetry is one thing that really got me ignited. And I've been writing poetry ever since. Obviously, there are lots of things and lots of factors you need to take into account, your emotions, your surroundings. But it always ends up with something that's quite creative and productive. And obviously poetry is beautiful, if you can see the beauty within it.
And when you are on your own and you're writing, how do you feel in that moment?
If it was my way and I had my own way, I think I'd be one of those crazy writers who'd wake up in the middle of the night and start writing. I've had some of those moments as well. But usually when there is a powerful emotion that takes over you, that's the moment that you need to sit down and write. As a result, I'm always writing things all over the place on post-its, on notepads, and then you use that kind of emotion and that kind of feeling to be able to construct the poem. So often the feeling of being positive, the positivity within you, helps you to become creative, and it releases those creative juices that you need to be able to write poetry. Whilst some people might think that writing poetry is easy, it's not such an easy job once you get started, and often you have to know when to start but also when to finish, because you might want to try and recreate, make it new, refine it, and it's a long process.
And all those writings have recently been published as a book, as a collection of poems, The Awakening. Tell us about this book.
I'd like to first of all thank the President's Fund for Creative Writing, in particular Dr. Anita Ojayeb, who actually allowed the process of this book. And The Awakening, the title in itself, I think is important. It makes allusion to a flower that's, a bud, and it's going to blossom, it's going to open. And the awakening is that kind of feeling, when you're going to reach an important point in your life, almost a little bit like an epiphany, a self-realization. And that's what the awakening is all about. It's about understanding yourself, understanding your passions, and most importantly, recognizing that love is very important. So the poems are divided into three sections: love lost, love gained, and then moments. I think that we live life through moments. Sometimes there are good moments, sometimes not so good moments. But whatever you do, the driving force should be love. And it should be your love that you have for your relationships, for your country, for nature, many different ways of loving. Friends, So I think that that's the guiding force in actually writing this collection of poems.
Very often when people write poems, they write about their fear, they write about their sadness, their grief, but you chose to write about love. What made you do so?
I think that we don't share enough love in this world. I think that we are often so caught up in our own routines and our own lives and our work that we don't think about the importance of love. Everything that we do should be made with love. Something very simple. I love making lunch for my family every single day. And for me, I don't necessarily have to say I love them, but it's through making this lunch that I'm able to tell them that I love them. And it's not any kind of lunch, it's a balanced meal because I want to make sure that my family are healthy. So whilst there are some poems in the book where it does express obviously negative emotions and fear, and there are even some allusions to domestic violence on women, which I very strongly take a stance against. The essence of the book is about love. We do need to share more love. When you think about it, 2 years ago we were hit by a pandemic. And if you think about the spiritual significance of this pandemic, in my own interpretation obviously, and in my humble opinion, it maybe made us, think more closely about the people we live with, the people that we work with, the people we are surrounded, our community, our society, and even, the love for your own country, to treat people the way you want to be treated.
We can see that you have read a lot of Jane Austen, a lot of women-centered book. Your poems are also very women-centered. Have you maybe been inspired by those books that you read?
Partly, yes. It's very difficult to sometimes put your finger on something specific when it comes to inspiration. But Jane Austen has immensely contributed to my inspiration of writing poetry. As a young teenager, I read every single Austen novel, and all her novels centered around women and their quest for marriage. I will never forget my teacher teaching us about the different approaches to marriage. So yes, Jane Austen has actually provoked a lot of thought within me as a teenager. But along the way of life, I've come across many other people who've been great inspirational poets themselves. Rungasamy. I remember reading his poetry in Creole on the newspaper, and I used to think, that's not an easy thing to do. So I've always had this kind of attachment to reading poetry, and in different languages, whether it's English, French, or even Creole. I've always, looked up to people, to local authors in particular, because I think, once it's very easy to criticize, it's not so easy to sit down and to be able to write something, but something that's provoking, something that will provoke somebody to think beyond what they know and to think outside of the box. So there's been those types of poets. Also my uncle, Dr. Punsami, he's also a local author, and he wrote a book a couple of years ago on the Tamil culture. And so I've always thought, there is possibility of writing. It doesn't matter how old you are and what your experiences are. If you put your heart into it, you can write something that's really great, I think.
Today you are a poet, an author. You have read your fair share of poems. If you could tell us in your own words, why do you think poems are important?
I think poetry is important because it's a way to be able to express yourself. When I was at school, I traditionally read a lot of Chaucer, Shakespeare, the famous Shakespearean sonnets, and also Blake. I don't know if people know about the Songs of Innocence and the Songs of Experience written by William Blake. Those were some of the poems that I really enjoyed reading as a teenager. But then along the path of life, you realize that with the newer generation of people, you can't always write poetry in the style of Blake. It has to change. And so in this day and age, I think that poetry can be much more of a spontaneous flow of your emotions. It doesn't need to be too scientific and too calculated. As a student, I was taught, to look at the rhythm and the rhyme and the number of syllables and the stanzas. Poetry, I think, now can be much more of a spontaneous flow of how we feel. But most importantly, what is the feeling that we want to provoke in the audience from the person who's actually reading the poem? So poetry is a very powerful way of self-expression. And I think I would actually encourage young people to write poetry or any form of expression, because I think it helps with understanding yourself and also with your own self-expression.
As a matter of fact, in Mauritius today, we can see a lot of emerging authors, a lot of young authors who are choosing to self-publish, because publishing in Mauritius can be quite a challenge. Have you maybe faced challenges yourself when you started out?
Absolutely, I have. One thing I have to say and be honest is that local authors are not really given the honour that they deserve. If you go into a bookshop in Mauritius, you'll find all the local authors in one corner of the room. And I think what the problem really is with us Mauritians, we don't often look at our own culture and our own literature, but we run to read, more famous authors, which is understandable. We all want to read, the Paulo Coelhos and the Isabel Allende's of this world. I know, I understand that. But I think in Mauritius we have a lot of talent, and there is a lot of people who are talented to write and to produce novels, poetry, short stories. It's difficult to publish your own book because it's expensive, and to be able to go and find an editor and a publishing house is not so easy. I've tried to do it myself with my first book, which was Healthy Eating and Happy Life, which is a book about being comfortable in one's own body, and what are the advantages of eating a low carbohydrate diet and limiting sugars. But that wasn't so easy to publish it in Mauritius, so I had to go for a different version, an online version of the book. But I'm very happy that the President's Fund for Creative Writing does give opportunity to young people or older people, doesn't matter the age, to be able to produce books. In Mauritius, though, through the President's Fund, it's more to do with literature. But I think that people in Mauritius have talent to write beyond that. There are other things, other themes that people in Mauritius can write about.
And the book that you recently published, The Awakening, all those writing, did you intend for them to turn into a book, or were you simply writing just for the sake of writing?
No, the poems are actually a production of my own feelings and thoughts, and it was written without the intention of it being published. And I think that's what makes it a little bit more authentic. It was just a very powerful, spontaneous flow of emotions. I thought about different titles and of different things that I wanted to include in my poems. And then, one day I thought, well, why not share these poems with the rest of the world? Maybe, it's something that people will appreciate. So that's how I contacted the ministry, and I realized that I could actually publish it. So that was one of my dreams, to actually become a published author, and that became a reality, which I'm very thankful for.
What do you hope readers take away from your poems?
I think what I would like people to think about when they read the poems is about appreciating the poem, appreciating the emotion that's attached to the poem, and to be in harmony with themselves. What we're finding that as I work with young people and the society, what we find is that people are not really in touch with their emotions, they're not in touch with their own feelings. So through reading the poetry, I would like people to take the time to think about the meaning of the poem, but also how does that link to me? How does that connect to me? I think the book can make people realize more about themselves, and that's, I think, what the main message is.
And among those poems, is there one in particular that you really like and would like to share with us? Tell us a bit about this poem.
I wrote two poems, one about my own mom and one about my mother-in-law. Two very strong women who I've met in my life and who I've encountered. I lost my mother when I was slightly older, but she always embodied strength and courage. And she always said to me, you are in charge of a family, but you don't forget that you need to look after yourself. So there's one poem that I wrote about her. And then my mother-in-law, who was a very quiet woman who had her own secret dreams and her own ambitions. But in the society that she grew up, she married when she was very young. But there were times when we had time to sit down together and to talk. And I didn't realize that she herself was a great literature lover. and that she actually loved reading Shakespeare. And so that was the hidden side of her that nobody really knew about. So those two poems are about the two women who've had an impact on me.
Oh mother, where are you? Gone with the wind, gone too soon. Your smiling face and glittering eyes held me company from birth to adulthood. Your nurturing arms, kind and protective and strong. Gone too soon to join the unknown, a love gained and lost too soon. Joyful and happy, dear mother, you are with the stars and the moon. I know you look down and send me your rays of hope, sending me your eternal love, blown in a kiss.
And have you ever maybe experienced uncertainty about your writing?
Absolutely, all the time. One of the things about writing is that you often think, does it make sense? Will I make a fool of myself? I'm writing what I feel. Will my audience understand the same thing? Will they be able to share my ideas and share my connection? So yes, to answer your question, lots of uncertainties, lots of doubt, but then you need to sit down and look at it again, rephrase certain things, look for alternative words. I'm a great lover of alliteration, so I like things that rhyme, but that doesn't come so easy because sometimes the words don't fit, they don't connect. So you have to play with words and play with ideas. So before you are able to produce something that you think is final, it comes with a lot of hard work, but also with a lot of resilience and a lot of patience. If you really want to do something well, it might mean doing it several times before you come up with the final product. So yes, patience is key, I think, to when you want to write and you want to be productive. So like, many writers, sometimes you do deal with writer's block. I can't think of anything, I can't write anything. And then in the middle of the night, you've got like one of those light bulb moments and then, there are things that you want to write about. So it's always important to be able to get up, make a note of what you want to say and then use it the next day. During the holidays, when I'm not working, that's the time when I would wake up and write, because that's when the ideas are flowing. So like any writer, you have your good moments, your bad moments. Sometimes you have to cultivate that patience to be able to sit down and get your head stuck into it and really get down to the writing.
Do you maybe have any advice for aspiring writers?
I think, if you feel that you have the ambition to write, you feel that connection with writing, you feel that you can express yourself, I would encourage young people to go for it. It doesn't need to be perfect, doesn't need to be grammatically correct, it doesn't need to be any need for rhyme or rhythm. Just write what you feel, and even if it's in a very raw state, it's something that you can work on, that you can refine on. I think writing is very powerful. The power of the pen, I think, is very important. It can help you manage your emotions, your anger, your stress. Simple things like writing diaries and journals. Sometimes these become books. You can never know where your writing can take you. So I do encourage young people. I know we live in the day and age of where new age technology, is taking over the world, but writing is also very important. Reading is very important. And it's through the reading that you can actually develop your own writing. So I encourage all the young people who might be watching this program today to embrace writing, because I think it's through writing and through reading that you can actually go on adventures in life. You might not always have the money to travel, you might not always be able to do what you want to do, but through reading and through writing, you can travel anywhere in your mind and in your heart.
C'est ici que prend fin cette édition de Mots et Écrits. Au plaisir de vous retrouver pour le prochain épisode. À très bientôt.